We're calling this one Misery for Profit, the history of private prisons in America. On February 11th, 2025, Damon Hininger, the CEO of CoreCivic, revealed that the company's value had blossomed from $1.5 billion to just over $2 billion, and then referred to this point in time as one of the most exciting periods of his career, saying that he anticipates the most significant growth in his company's history over these next several years. CoreCivic are the second largest prison firm in America, second only to the Geo Group. And it's because of orders from Donald Trump to build a bunch more private prisons that they are looking quite forward to a bright future for them and a dark future for inmates everywhere. But how does a business model like this even exist? Like, why does it even exist? Join me as we discuss the history of the private prison system in America. Pop quiz. What do a nursing student from Georgia, a company founded in a decrepit motel, and the very concept of immigration have in common? The short answer? Not much. But the long answer? Still not much. But they are all factors related to the concept of how Donald Trump is making life better for the private prison industry executives of America and much worse for everyone else. Now, if you've been following me over on Substack, you may have seen an article we published over there titled How Congress Exploited the Murder of a Young Woman to Detain Immigrants. In that article, I go over remarks made on recent earnings calls by Damon Hininger. During that call, Hininger revealed that the company's value had blossomed from $1.5 billion to just over $2 billion, and then referred to this point in time as one of the most exciting periods of his entire career, saying he anticipates the most significant growth in his company's history over just the next couple of years. The reason CoreCivic has grown the way that it has? Donald Trump was elected president, and on his first day of the presidency, he reversed a Biden-era order that had directed the Department of Justice to not renew contracts with private prison companies. Now, this isn't really a surprise. I mean, we knew that Donald Trump was very into the private prison companies. His Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has a long history of lobbying for private prison firms. But what makes this all a perfect storm is that on January 29th, Trump also signed into law this thing called the Laken Riley Act. This was reported by Brian Bennett at Time magazine as something that would, quote, force immigration officers to arrest and detain immigrants in the country unlawfully who were arrested or admitted to a minor theft, minor crimes, something like theft of under $100, or any crime that results in death or serious bodily injury, while also expanding the new power that state attorney generals have over federal immigration policy. They are now allowed to sue the federal government to have specific immigrants detained and force the State Department to block visas from countries that won't take back individuals that are being deported. In short, the Laken Riley Act has provided a massive backdoor for immediate lockups of countless immigrants across America and the ability to send them to these private detention centers because, yes, those are also part of the private prison system. But that's not all, though. It's not just immigrants who have admitted to even small crimes that could be detained in these private detention centers or imprisoned. The Trump administration has right now, as of this recording, detained and imprisoned a green card carrying legal permanent resident of the United States. He was arrested without a proper crime even being charged, and he was shipped off from New York to a detention center in Louisiana. I'm, of course, speaking of Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian graduate student who served as the ombudsman, which is like a fancy word for the peace negotiator between the Free Palestine student protesters and Colombia's administration during the height of the War on Gaza protests. As of this recording, he is also still being held thousands of miles away in a detention center meant for near future deportees who have been convicted of a crime. He hasn't been convicted of anything, and he's a U.S. green card legal resident. He shouldn't be in a deportation camp for immigrants. This just goes to show that there are no limits to the Trump administration's willingness to lock up people maybe that haven't even committed a crime yet, just people they don't like the speech of. A protected act. Over on Substack, we use this as an opportunity to go over the history of both CoreCivic and the Laken Riley Act, but here on YouTube, I wanted to go a bit deeper and do a few videos about the private prison system. What are they? How long have they existed? Why do they still exist? Which of your elected officials has received donations from CoreCivic's PAC, their individual members or employees or owners, or those individuals immediate family members. Teaser, they did give $75 to Representative Jasmine Crockett, and they gave $10 to Representative Ilhan Omar, but they gave $33,700 to Republican Senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, and $14,600 to Majority Leader, a Republican Senator again, John Thune. And $223,223 to the Republican National Committee. And that's just in 2024, and that does not count the money they gave to Republican PACs, who they of course also gave big money to, or the millions of dollars in lobbying they spent. And if you're wondering, okay, but CoreCivic is second to Geo, did Geo spend as much money on the Republicans? No, they spent more. So, putting that aside for a quick second, my name is V, and this is my YouTube channel where I dive deep under the desk to find the crumpled paper trails of long-forgotten history while also gently reminding you that even when everything seems like it's going to be just awful, there is always even a small light at the end of the tunnel. So make sure to like and subscribe, because today we are talking about the history of private prisons. Let me tell you something. First, you might be asking, what even is a private prison and how do they differ from, like, I guess, a regular prison? To put it simply, they are prisons that incarcerate folks, but for profit. In 2022, a report from the Sentencing Project found that across 27 states, as well as in cases involving federal crimes, over 90,000 people were put away in private prisons, and that is, again, just as of 2022, which is the most recent data we have. That is right. 8% of all state and federal prisoners are housed in a private prison. Okay, but how do prisons make money by locking people up? Simple. A private prison, like CoreCivic or Geo, makes a contract with maybe a state or a federal government, and then they work out a compensation package for the management of the facilities. Now, how they became a for-profit model is the company charges more than it actually costs to run the facility, but less than it would cost for the public prisons to run, because public prisons, federal prisons, now we're getting into pensions, unions, stuff like that, pricier. And by privatizing the industry, of course, they can eliminate some of those costs, not just from the care they give to people who are housed there, but also in the compensation packages for the people who work there. It's a lose-lose for everyone, except, I guess, of course, the executives at the top. As Brett Burkhardt puts it for The Conversation, in theory, private firms compete to submit a desirable bid. But in practice, competition is limited as the industry is dominated by two major firms. And of course, he's again referencing CoreCivic and Geo. He goes on to say, the firm with the winning bid then assumes full responsibility for managing the day-to-day operations of a prison facility. They hire the staff, they discipline prisoners, they stock supplies, they provide legally mandated programs, and all that kind of jazz. In return, the government pays the firm, typically on a per inmate per day basis. And in taking over operational responsibilities, the firm also assumes all the legal liability in the event of a legal or constitutional dispute. You can think of a private prison firm as an independent contractor. They're providing a service to make the government's life easier and a whole lot of inmates' lives way friggin' harder. So how long has this been going on for? In the form that we know them today, this goes back to, you guessed it, Ronald Reagan, since 1984, with the creation of the Corrections Corporation of America, or CCA. We're going to have more on them later. Prison privatization has existed in one form or another globally for a really long time, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to focus specifically on U.S. private prisons. Now, if we take it all the way from 1984 to 1844, we'll get to one of the earliest examples of prisons being privatized. It happened in Louisiana with a company known as McHatton, Pratt & Ward. They ran the state's penitentiary as a factory, and they made inmates produce cheap clothes for the enslaved. Now, this also brings up the consistent debate surrounding the 13th Amendment, the abolishment of all forms of slavery, except as punishment for a crime. So, like any laws that benefit the human rights of Americans, the elite immediately got to work in finding a loophole in the amendment, which led to something called convict leasing. This is a precursor to the private prison system that saw companies paying prisons to send out inmates as unpaid labor. They did stuff like laying railroad tracks, plantation work, or even the dangerous act of coal mining. Private prisons that we know today were created in 1984 by three men, Thomas W. Beasley, Robert Krantz, and especially T. Don Hutto, the ringleaders of the Corrections Corporations of America known as CCA, and today known as CoreCivic. Now, a lot of what we know about CoreCivic's history comes thanks to investigative reporter Shane Bauer, who spent 4 months working undercover as a guard at a medium security Louisiana prison run by CCA. Now, I highly recommend reading Bauer's book, American Prison, A Reporter's Undercover Journey into the Business of Punishment, if you want a much deeper dive into CoreCivic, but I will warn you, it is not an easy read. It is not a gentle story. It is an important story, though. In short, Bauer discovered that CCA was formed when Beasley was at a Republican presidential fundraiser in the early 80s with Krantz. After wining and dining, they small-talked their way into the billion-dollar idea of privatizing prisons. They just needed someone who knew a thing or two about prisons and turning a profit. Enter bastard of the prison industry, T. Don Hutto, or Donnie Boy, who had managed Virginia's prison system for 5 years, following stints at the Ramsey Plantation in Texas and the Arkansas prison system. Now, this is the kind of man who in the 70s had something called prison rodeos in his prison. As Bauer states, hundreds of people bought tickets to watch inmates compete for small cash prizes. Prisoners wearing cartoonish uniforms with black and white stripes rode broncos. During one inmate's riding debut, he was kicked in the stomach and had to be carried off on a stretcher. These guys are the masterminds of the American private prison system. And mastermind they did. The Immigration and Naturalization Service, which existed before ICE, gave Hutto and Beasley the, quote, first contract ever to design, build, finance, and operate a secure correctional facility. And it was for undocumented immigrants. And they only had 90 days to build it. So they remodeled the decrepit Houston motel into a ramshackle detention center. The place was put together so shoddily, it still had the day rates available sign up. Not so fun fact, Donnie Hutto personally processed 87 undocumented immigrants himself on Super Bowl Sunday, the first day that the center operated. Now, as time went on, CoreCivic evolved from its humble origins into a major corporation that own and operate jails and prisons under contract with all kinds of governments, from the local level all the way up to the federal level. And they specialize in creating detention centers for ICE. According to a study done by the American Friends Service Committee, CoreCivic today operates 43 prisons and jails, owning 39 of them, and can detain up to 65,000 folks at any given time. Now you might be asking, V, did CoreCivic change their name from CCA to get away from allegations of neglecting prisoners to the point that they died of relatively easy-to-treat diseases? Or was it from the reports that costs were cut so low at Lake Erie Prison that there was no running water, and therefore inmates had to do their business in plastic bags? Or maybe it was because of those confirmations that at least one prison was falsifying its employment data to disguise guards working 48-hour shifts? I mean, one would think that after multiple reports of corrections officers running a gladiator school where they allegedly made inmates fight each other for guards' amusement, sometimes to their death, we would have a good enough reason to necessitate a rebrand. But no, none of that bothered them. They weren't trying to escape any of that. Officially, the rebrand came as a result of the culmination of a multi-year strategy to transform our business from largely corrections and detention services to a wider range of government solutions. The CoreCivic name speaks to our ability to solve the tough challenges facing government at all levels, to the deep sense of service that we feel every day to help people. That, according to Damon T. Hininger. Likely due to the success of Hutto's business model, a man named George Zoley followed suit in 1984. That's not ironic at all that this all happened in 1984. 1984, the Doomsday Book. 1984, the beginning of the prison privatization system. Anywho, George Zoley followed suit in 1984 when he created Wackenhut Corrections, a subsidiary of the Wackenhut Corporation. Today, Wackenhut is known as the GEO Group, or the Geo Group, and it is the largest American private prison firm in America, with their own set of controversies like allegations of retaliating against immigrant detainees or not paying their inmates their proper compensation, which is like $1 a day at best. Now, despite the prevalence of private prisons, I'm going to give you the hottest of hot takes here and say that maybe, controversially, private prisons should not exist. I know, you didn't see that one coming, did you? Okay, well, even with this brief history lesson, I'm sure you know why private prisons can be a problem. I mean, they may seem to be great to the numbers, folks, and as Sean Bryant says in Investopedia, if it costs the government $200 a day to incarcerate somebody and a private prison company can do it for $150 a day, then why not save the government $50 while allowing a corporation to profit? But he follows this up by giving a helpful and brief breakdown of why private prisons are bad. Number one, they make more money by locking up more prisoners. There is an incentive to incarcerating people when, in fact, our incarceration system was supposed to be a rehabilitation system, not a forever place to be. And it goes without saying, but trouble is, CoreCivic and Geo's best interests are served if people keep breaking the law. And it's likely that many lobbyists are pushing for stricter laws to ensure that more people can get incarcerated for smaller and smaller crimes. Quote, some pundits have even argued that private prison business interests are responsible for the introduction of more and more tougher laws designed to get more people locked up. Furthermore, a study of recidivism rates in 24 states by the U.S. Department of Justice found that 82% of individuals released from state prisons were rearrested at least once within 10 years after being released. This means that the firms have seemingly no interest in rehabilitation. I mean, why would they want to rehabilitate somebody with a statistic like 82% repeat customers? Each body is another dollar being added to their ledgers. They have no incentive to make people better. Number two, private prisons are incentivized to cut corners. Given that these are for-profit businesses, if they can cut staff pay or benefits or services from their lists, then they save money. Suppose a prison cuts out the cleaning services and the cost per inmate drops by $90 a day. It instantly earns an additional $10 a day, a number that can add up quickly if there are thousands of inmates in the facility. There are countless examples of corners being cut in private prisons, and an old AP report from 2013 found that shift logs at the Idaho Correctional Center of South Boise falsified the guards' work hours. They were actually working up to 48 hours consecutively without time off. And if you watched Orange is the New Black, you'll remember that they started bringing in bunk beds. Why have one body in a cell when you can have four? Number three is cheap labor, baby. That's what it's all about, right? Private prisons have been accused of saving money on services like cleaning and maintenance by getting the prisoners to do the same job for significantly lower wages. According to the ACLU, the U.S. prison population is paid on average between 13 and 52 cents an hour. These savings go straight into the company's pockets and are made by bypassing labor laws designed to protect workers' rights. Private prisons are also known to make money on the side by selling goods that are produced by the prisoners to the outside world. Combined, these controversial savings and extra income can make private prisons a lot of money and significantly fatten their profit margins. When you think about it, it's basically the foundation of what we discussed earlier, convict leasing. CoreCivic and Geo are supposed to be saving the state's money, but do they actually? A 2020 study titled Do Privately Owned Prisons Increase Incarceration Rates found that if private prisons have an average increase of 178 new prisoners per million per year, you're actually seeing states eat the bill of anywhere from $1.9 to $10.6 million per year, since prisoners cost about $60 a day to house. And where do those dollars come from? Your tax money, baby. That's right. We're winning big now. The tariffs have come. We pay for them to profit again and again and again. And we hurt our friends and our neighbors and our communities in the process. All because this kind of stuff goes on while other wacko banana distractions go on, and we can't possibly focus on all of it. This has been just part one of our deep dive into the private prison industry. We're gonna have part two coming out, but I had to hold it back a little bit because I wanna see what's gonna be going on with the Palestinian activist that's been, in my opinion, unlawfully detained in Louisiana. And we wanna make sure we include that in part two because it's just gonna change a lot of what we can expect and who can expect to be imprisoned. So thank you for following. Make sure you check out the other videos, especially the one on what's happening with the Department of Education. That is something that we can still push back on right now if we are educated on the ways that he plans to demolish it. Sometimes knowing their path through the woods is the best way to ensure they don't burn down the forest, I guess. I don't know. This one was bleak. Whew. Give yourself a hug and maybe get a cookie.